The bank manager slid the paper across the desk and said, "Mrs. Calloway, you've been on this mortgage since 2011. I sat with that for a second. 12 years. Doing the. I had paid my parents' rent for 12 years in that house. $600 a month, then $800, then $950 when my father said property taxes had gone up. Evil. I'd been handing over cash and checks, and then Zell's transfers like a tenant who was grateful to have a place to land after grad school. And the whole time, my name was on the mortgage. My father was sitting 2 chairs to my left. He didn't look at the paper. He looked at the wall behind the manager's head. I didn't say anything either. I'd learned that from him actually. When you don't know what to say, you go quiet and you wait for someone else to make the first mistake. He rubbed his forehead. That was the tell I'd been watching for my entire life and never understood until that moment. I should explain the version my parents told, because it's the one most people believed. The story was that I moved back home at 29 after graduate school because I was struggling. Couldn't find stable work in my field right away, had student loans, needed a soft landing. My parents opened their door. They charged me a little rent. Reasonable, they said, because it taught responsibility. My father would say, at dinner tables and church potlucks, and wherever the topic came up, we didn't want to enable her. We wanted to help her grow. People nodded. People said they were good parents. Here's what was actually true. I moved back home in 2011 because my mother had a health scare and I wanted to be close. I had a job, a real one, junior associate at a mid-size audit firm, $42,000 a year, which wasn't great but wasn't nothing. I offered to help with groceries. My father said the fair thing was to treat me like an adult and have me contribute to the household. $600 a month. I said okay. That part I understood. That part I even respected. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing, was that 6 months before I moved home, my father had refinanced the house. And when he refinanced, he'd added my name to the loan as a co-borrower. He never mentioned it. Not once. Not in 2011, not in 2015, not in 2019. He took my rent checks, cashed them, and said nothing. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I know people will say, how did you not know your name was on a mortgage? And the answer is, because I trusted my father with financial things, because he'd been managing them since I was young. Because when paperwork came that looked official and confusing, I signed what he put in front of me and assumed it was something routine. A household insurance update. A utility account. Something. I signed the co-borrower addendum on a Tuesday night in March 2011. I don't remember it. That's the honest answer. I genuinely don't remember it. I do remember my father making me a grilled cheese that night and asking about my job. I remember we watched the news together. I remember thinking it was nice, being back, being close to them. I was 29 years old, and I thought my father was on my side. I am 41 now. I have been a forensic accountant for 14 years. I have sat across tables from people who have committed insurance fraud, corporate embezzlement, payroll theft. I know what hidden money looks like. I know the document trails, the transfer patterns, the way numbers lie when someone's moving something they don't want found. I tell you that, not to brag. I tell you that because you should understand what it means that I missed this for 12 years. It wasn't that I wasn't looking. It's that I wasn't looking at home. Home was the place I thought I understood. The letter came on a Wednesday in September 2023. It was addressed to Dennis and Rosalind Calloway and Nadia Calloway at my parents' address. I don't live there anymore. I moved into an apartment in 2020. But I still got mail there sometimes. My parents forwarded it to me without opening it, which they rarely did. Usually my mother opened everything and left it on the counter with a sticky note. The return address was Midwest Federal Savings, and the subject line said, Annual Escrow Statement. Account ending 4471. I didn't have an account with Midwest Federal Savings. I almost set it aside. Equally. It was a Wednesday evening and I'd had a long day, and there was leftover Thai food in my refrigerator, and I genuinely almost just put the letter on my desk for later. But the word escrow caught me. Escrow means property. Property means a deed or a mortgage or both. And my name was on the outside of the envelope. I opened it at my kitchen counter, standing up, still in my work clothes. The statement listed the property address, my parents' house. It listed the loan origination date, March 2011. It listed the borrowers, Dennis Calloway, Rosalind Calloway, Nadia Calloway. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is not something I normally do. Speen. If you've ever been treated like you needed to be managed, like the version of yourself your family decided on when you were a kid was the only version they'd accept, you'll understand why my first feeling wasn't anger. It was something quieter than that. A kind of slow sinking recognition, like when you find out a movie you loved as a child doesn't hold up at all, and you have to reckon with why you loved it so much in the first place. I sat on that floor for maybe 20 minutes. Then I got up, made a cup of coffee, and started writing down questions. The first thing I did was pull my credit report. I use a credit monitoring service for work, so this took me about 4 minutes. I pulled all 3 Buzos, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, Ipe. The Midwest Federal Mortgage was on all 3. Had been since 2011, 30-year fixed, listed under my name as a co-borrower. And there it was. The reason I'd been turned down for a home loan twice in the last 5 years. My debt-to-income ratio. Every time I tried to buy a place of my own, the lender would run my credit, see this mortgage, calculate my share of the debt, and the numbers wouldn't work. My loan officer in 2019 told me my DTI was too high and suggested I pay down some debt. I told him I didn't have significant debt. He said the report showed a mortgage. I told him that was my parents' house. He said, "Are you on the loan?" I said I didn't think so. He said I was. I assumed it was an error. I called Midwest Federal's customer service line, sat on hold for 40 minutes, and was told there was no mistake. I was listed as a co-borrower on the account, and there was a signed addendum to confirm it. I asked them to mail me a copy of the addendum. They said they could send it to the address on file. The address on file was my parents' house. I never followed up. I was busy. I was embarrassed. I thought maybe there was some explanation I was miss. Something my father had set up to help me, some tax benefit I didn't understand, and I just needed to ask him about it, and he'd explain. I didn't ask. I let it go. Looking at that credit report in 2023, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, embarrassed at myself, not at my parents, at myself. For how many times I'd let something go that deserved a second look. I wrote down 3 numbers from the report: the loan balance, the monthly payment amount, the origination date. Then I pulled up my own bank records from 2011 onward and started looking at what I'd actually paid my parents. The rent checks, 12 years of them, added up to $109,800. The numbers sat there on my spreadsheet like a small, ugly fact. Before I tell you what I found in the second account, I want you to understand something about how financial betrayal works inside families. It almost never looks like theft at the beginning. It looks like help. It looks like guidance. It looks like someone older and wiser just handling things while you get settled. The transition from help to harm slowly keys, and it happens most easily with people who already trust you. I called the mortgage servicer the next morning from my office. I didn't call from home. I didn't want to risk being overheard. Not because I thought my apartment was bugged, but because I've done enough investigations to know that you don't make sensitive calls in spaces you share with anyone who might have skin in the game. I identified myself as a co-borrower on the account ending 4471. Gave my social security number, answered their verification questions. The rep pulled the file. I asked her to walk me through the payment history from the beginning. The mortgage payment, principal and interest and escrow, had been $1,247 per month since origination. I had been paying my parents between $600 and $950 per month for 12 years. I asked the rep, was the account ever delinquent? He checked. No, never. Not one late payment in 12 years. So where was the money coming from? I asked her if I could request a full copy of the loan documents, including the co-borrower addendum, Gießen. She said yes, and she could mail them to the address on file or to any address I provided. I gave her my office address. Then I sat back in my chair and thought about my father, Heber. Dennis Calloway is a deacon at First Memorial Baptist. He's been there since before I was born. He coached Little League for 15 years. Yipdu. He runs a small handyman business that he's had since he retired from the post office, and he's one of those people who always seems to have a little cash and never quite explains where it comes from. Not suspiciously, just like it's not important enough to mention. You know the type. Good with his hands, good with people, always between you and any problem, before you've finished describing the problem. He's the kind of man who makes you feel taken care of, right up until you realize taken care of was always on his terms. The documents arrived at my office 8 days later. The co-borrower addendum was 2 pages. My signature was on page 2, dated March 14, 2011. I stared at it for a long time. It was my signature, not forged, genuinely mine. But I had no memory of signing it, no memory of what I'd been told it was for. I took a photo of both pages and saved them to my encrypted work drive. Then, I opened a fresh spreadsheet and started what I always do at the beginning of an investigation. I made a list of every question I didn't yet have an answer to. I drove to my parents' house on a Sunday in October. I didn't say anything about the mortgage. I brought a pan of cornbread because it was the kind of thing I always brought, and I sat at the kitchen table with my mother while she made chicken and watched football highlights. Normal Sunday. My father came in from the backyard, washed his hands at the sink, asked how work was going. Good, I said. Busy. He nodded. You eat yet? Not yet. We sat down for dinner. My mother talked about a woman from her church group who'd had hip surgery. My father talked about a guttering job he'd done for a neighbor. I listened and ate and waited. After dinner, when my mother got up to do dishes, I said, Dad, can I ask you something about the house? He got that stillness. I'd seen it my whole life but never named it. He set his fork down and looked at the table. What about it? He said. I got a statement from Midwest Federal. My name is on the mortgage. Heber. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I was going to explain that to you. Okay, I said. I'm listening. He said it was a refinancing thing from back in 2011. That having my income on the loan had gotten them a better rate, that it wasn't a big deal legally, that I'd never have to pay anything. He said he'd planned to take my name off once things settled down. Things settled down 12 years ago, I said. He rubbed his forehead. My mother came back into the doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel, and I could tell from the way she looked at him that this wasn't new information for her. Nadia, she said, don't make this into something. I'm not making it into anything, I said. I'm asking a question, Eben. You're here to start trouble. I'm here because I'm on a mortgage and nobody told me. My father said, I will get it straightened out. His voice was patient, reasonable, the voice he used at church. You don't need to worry about this. Dad, I said, I've been denied a home loan twice because of my debt-to-income ratio. Because of this mortgage. There was a long silence. My mother sat back down. She looked at her plate. My father said, we didn't know it would affect you that way. I sat with that. Then I said I had to get home. I hugged them both. I drove home. I did not cry until I was in my parking garage, and even then it was brief, more out of tiredness than sadness. The next morning, I sent a request to the county recorder's office for all property records associated with my parents' address going back to 2005. The county records came back within 2 weeks. Electronic copies sent to my work email. I printed everything and laid it out on my desk. The original mortgage, 2002. Dennis and Rosalind Calloway, traditional 30-year fixed. That was normal. The 2011 refinance. Dennis Calloway, Rosalind Calloway, and Nadia Calloway, co-borrower. The refinance had pulled out $47,000 in equity. Cash out refinance. I looked at that number for a while. Keep me. My parents hadn't just added my name to get a better rate. They'd refinanced the house, pulled $47,000 out of the equity, and put my name on the new, larger loan. I went back to my rent records. In 2011, when I moved in, I paid $600 a month. In 2013, my father said property taxes had increased and asked me to go up to $700. In 2015, $800. In 2018, $950. Each increase came with a reason: utilities, taxes, maintenance, that sounded sensible, and that I never verified. I cross-referenced the actual property tax records for their county. Property taxes had increased, yes, by about 180 over 12 years, total, not per year. Total. I looked at my rental payment history again. I had paid $109,800 over 12 years. The mortgage payment over that same period, at $1,247 a month, came to $179,560. So they'd collected a $9,800 from me and presumably paid the rest themselves, or close to it. But here's the thing about forensic accounting. The first number that looks wrong is almost never the one you end up writing in your report. It's a pointer. It's pointing you towards something else. I looked again at the cash-out amount, $47,000, pulled out in March 2011. I requested my parents' bank records through a different channel, one available to me through my firm's relationship with a banking compliance network, used for investigative purposes. This was legal, within the scope of my professional access, and I documented everything. The $47,000 had been deposited in a separate checking account at a different bank, not the main household account I knew about. An account in my father's name only. Over the following 18 months, that account had been used to make payments on 2 vehicles, fund what appeared to be a small business investment, and transfer $11 EB zeros to an account I didn't recognize. The $11,000 transfer was dated December 2012. The receiving account was flagged in the memo field as Calloway Properties LLC's. I had never heard of Calloway Properties LLC. I found Calloway Properties LLC in the Ohio Secretary of State Business Database on a Tuesday afternoon. Registered 2009. Principal, Dennis R. Calloway. The LLC held one asset that I could trace through property records. A small rental house about 4 miles from my parents' place. Purchased in 2010. So while I'd been paying my parents' rent in their house, the house that my name was on, my father had been running a separate rental property through a company he'd never mentioned to me. I know how the dots look when you lay them out like this. They look deliberate, they look calculated, and maybe they were. But I also know my father, and I think some of it was simpler and worse than that. He just never thought I'd look. He'd spent 30 years deciding I wasn't the type to look. He'd built that into me slowly, carefully, and he'd been right about it until he wasn't. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney. Her name was Patricia Weston, and her office was in a building downtown with a parking garage that validated. I'd worked with her on a client matter a couple years before. She was direct, unhurried, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. I brought 3 things: the co-borrower addendum with my signature, the county property records, and a printed summary I'd put together of the rent payments, the cash-out refinance, and the Calloway Properties LLC transfers. She read through everything. I watched her go back to the co-borrower addendum twice and look at the date. She didn't say anything for a while. "How long have you been on this loan?" she finally asked. 12 years. She set the page down. "And when you signed this, they told you what exactly?" "I don't remember signing it." That got a look. Not judgment, more like she was recalibrating. You don't remember it at all, Keen. I have a signature on a document I don't remember being asked to sign. Whether I signed it or someone else did, I can't tell you. It looks like mine. She made a note. The $47,000 equity pullout. Any of that go to you? No. She didn't say anything for a moment then. Your credit's taken hits from this. 2 loan denials. I have both letters. She took off her reading glasses. Okay, here's Swetha. Here's where you are. The co-borrower situation is either invalid consent or mispresentation. Either way, you have grounds to push for removal. They'd need to refinance in their names only. At their age, at current rates, that might be hard for them to qualify for. I know. There's also a possible misappropriation angle on the equity proceeds. That's a different conversation. I'm not looking to go after them financially, I said. I want my name off that loan. She looked at me. Then that's what we work toward. It was a short meeting. I'd expected more complexity, more uncertainty, more of her telling me the situation was murky. She just said, "You have a clear problem, here's the path, here." I drove home thinking about how many years I'd spent not asking the direct question because I was afraid the answer would be complicated. It wasn't complicated, it was just true. I asked my parents to come to my apartment for dinner. On a Sunday in November, I told them I'd made pot roast, which was true. I told them I wanted to show them the place, now that I'd finished furnishing it properly, which was also true. I did not tell them what I had in the blue folder on my kitchen counter. My father noticed the folder immediately. He has always been observant about surfaces. Where things are, what's new, keep. What doesn't belong. He glanced at it when he came in and then didn't look at it again, which is a tell of its own. We ate dinner. The pot roast was good. My mother complimented the curtains. My father fixed a loose cabinet hinge while he was there because he cannot visit anyone's home without fixing something. After dinner, I poured coffee and set the folder on the table. My father looked at it. I found everything, I said. I didn't make it a dramatic announcement. It came out quiet, the way it does when you're saying something you've been holding for a long time. And you're not afraid of it anymore. The co-borrower addendum, the cash out, the LLC, the separate account, the rental property. My mother looked at my father. My father wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. I also have the 2 mortgage denial letters, I said, from 2018 and 2021. Both times, my debt-to-income ratio, because of this loan. I opened the folder and laid out the documents one at a time. Not quickly. Each one down the way you'd set something fragile on a table with care. The escrow statement. The co-borrower addendum with my signature. The county records. The cash-out refinance disclosure. The LLC filing. The bank transfer record showing the $11,000 to Callaway Properties. My father said, "Nadia, let me finish." He went quiet. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant it, mostly. I'm telling you what I know because you need to understand the situation. My attorney has reviewed everything. What needs to happen is a refinance. Your names only, my name removed from the loan. My credit has had this mortgage on it for 12 years. It has to come off. My mother said, "We can't afford to refinance right now." I know, I said. That's the problem, isn't it? My father set his mug down. I was going to take care of this. When? He didn't answer. I asked you in October. You said things would get settled. Things didn't get settled in 12 years, Dad. He rubbed his forehead. That gesture, the one I'd watched my whole life. The one I now understood was what he did when he was out of deflections. I did not want to burden you, he said. You put my name on a mortgage without telling me. I thought it would help you build your credit. It destroyed my credit-to-debt ratio. I couldn't buy a house. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. Her eyes were wet. She said, "We're sorry, baby. And here's the thing. I'm a person who follows evidence for a living, and evidence only shows what it shows." The record had my father's signature on a fraud flag. It didn't have the Sunday dinners on it. It didn't have the time he drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because I called him crying after a breakup in grad school. It didn't have any of that. I held her hand for a moment. Then I said, I've given my attorney authorization to contact Midwest Federal directly. She'll coordinate the refinance process. If there are costs I need to cover to remove my name, I'll cover them. Eat me. I've also reported the discrepancy to the lender, which means they'll be doing their own review of the cash-out proceeds. My father looked up at that. The lender will be in touch, I said. The lender's fraud review took about 3 months. They determined that the cash-out refinance had been obtained using income documentation that included my salary without my informed participation in the loan's purpose. It fell into a gray zone legally. I had technically signed, but the circumstances suggested the signing was not fully informed consent. Midwest Federal flagged the file, referred it to their compliance team, and required my parents to refinance in their names only and at current market rates. In 2023, that meant a significantly higher interest rate than 2011 loan. My parents' monthly payment went up by over $400. Callaway Properties LLC was dissolved in 2024, after my father was unable to carry both mortgages on his fixed income. He sold the rental property. I was removed from the original mortgage in February 2024. I watched my credit report update in real time. The debt-to-income ratio dropped. Within 4 months, I was approved for a home loan. I bought a house in June 2024, 3 bedrooms, small backyard, about 20 minutes from my office. I closed on a Thursday afternoon and drove home to my apartment that night and sat in my kitchen for a while, just sitting, which I seem to do a lot of lately. 18. My mother called that evening. She asked if I'd found a place. I told her I had. She said, "I'm glad, sweetheart, I really am." I believed her. That's the complicated part. I believed her, and I was still angry, and I was also glad to talk to her, all at once. My father and I haven't spoken much since November. Not because I've cut him off. I haven't, and I don't think I will, but some silences are just true. Some distances are just where you end up. I think we'll find our way back to something. I don't know yet what it looks like. What I know is this. I went back to that kitchen table, brought documents, told the truth, watched a man who'd spent 30 years deciding. I wasn't the type to finally understand that I was. He had a whole life built around that assumption. I guess we both did. The blue folder is still on my kitchen counter. The new one, in my new house. I put it there the day I moved in. Not the same folder but the same color. On purpose. People ask me sometimes, when I tell this story, whether I hate him. I don't. That would take more energy than I have for it. And it wouldn't be entirely true. What I feel, mostly, is clear, like something that was sitting at an angle in my chest for 12 years has finally been leveled out. He built his house on my name. I just came to take it back. If you believe every lie leaves a paper trail, subscribe before the next record is opened.